Maria Bennett stepped out of the taxi and paused at the edge of the long driveway. The sun was bright and the air smelled of fresh-cut grass. She tugged gently at her uniform collar, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that this job was her chance to shine. Ever since she left her small hometown, she had cared for children of different ages and backgrounds. But this would be her first time working for a family with so much money, so much comfort. She smoothed her skirt, picked up her bag, and walked toward the front door. When the door opened, Maria found herself face to face with a tall man in a crisp suit. His hair was dark and neatly combed, smiled politely, but with a trace of tiredness in his eyes. He introduced himself as Thomas Carlyle. Maria offered her hand, and he shook it firmly before turning inside to invite her in. The lobby was bright and spacious. Marble floors gleamed under the soft light of a chandelier. Tall windows looked out on a garden with flowering bushes and high hedges.
Ow.
Maria stood quietly, taking it all in, but she kept her attention on Thomas. He led her down a wide hallway, painted in soothing colors, pale blue and ivory. They stopped before a large room with a low window that looked out onto the lawn. "There is my son, Oliver," Thomas said in a low voice. He pointed to a small boy sitting on a rug, playing with wooden blocks. The boy looked around 5 years old. He had curly brown hair and wore a bright red shirt. But Maria noticed something else first. Oliver did not look up when his father spoke. He did not speak either. Thomas followed her gaze and sighed. "Oliver has not spoken since he was a baby. We've taken him to the best doctors and specialists. They call it selective mutism, but they have no clear reason why he stopped. My wife and I, we worry about him every day." Maria nodded gently. She kept her voice calm. "I understand. Children respond to care in many ways. I will do my best to help him feel safe." She forced herself not to look overwhelmed and sighed. However, her heart raced. She had never worked with a child who did not speak at all, but she knew that patience and kindness could bring out a child's hidden courage. Thomas smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Maria. Let me show you the rest of the house, and then you can start tomorrow morning." He led her away, and Maria took a last look at Oliver. He lifted a bright yellow block and slid it across the rug toward her. Maria smiled and picked it up. She tipped it back toward him. He smiled faintly and picked up another block. The first connection felt like a small spark of hope. Maria spent the afternoon exploring the house with Thomas. She saw the kitchen with gleaming metal appliances, the dining room with a long table set with fine china, and a small playroom filled with toys and books. Finally, Thomas showed her the bedroom she would use when she stayed overnight. It was simple but cozy, with a soft bed and a window that looked onto the backyard. Before he left, Thomas reminded her of one rule. "Oliver has a routine," he said. "He eats breakfast in his playroom at exactly 7. Then he spends the morning in lessons with his tutor, Miss Patel. After lunch, he goes to the park, or works on art or music. He likes to end his day with a story before bed." Maria nodded. "I will keep to his schedule," she promised. That evening, Maria sat on her small balcony overlooking the garden. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. She closed her eyes and remembered how she had come to this point. Back home, she had cared for her younger siblings when her parents worked long hours. She had learned to listen to unspoken needs, to notice the way a child's eyes could say more than words. Now, she would use that gift to help Oliver. Whispered a silent prayer for courage and kindness. The next morning, Maria woke before dawn. She dressed quickly in her uniform, tying her hair into a neat bun. She tucked a small notebook into her pocket. She planned to keep notes on Oliver's behavior and progress. By 6:55, she was in the playroom. The walls were painted light green and decorated with animal stickers. A small table held bowls of cereal and fruit. Oliver sat at the table, staring out the window. Maria cleared her throat softly. "Good morning, Oliver," she said in a gentle voice. He did not respond. She set the bowls quietly on the table. Oatmeal with berries for Isabel and scrambled eggs for Thomas, who sometimes joined them. Then she placed a little plate of toast and fruit in front of Oliver. He looked at the food but did not reach for it. Maria remembered that hunger could be both friend and fifth. A child felt too nervous, he might not eat. She sat down beside him and began her own breakfast, making sure to eat slowly and with calm movements. After a moment, Oliver studied her, picked up a piece of toast, and nibbled it. "Ooh, you like blueberries," Maria said quietly, pointing to the small pile of fruit on his plate. He lifted a blueberry on his fork, held it, and then swallowed. She smiled and held up her fork, pretending to offer him more. He giggled softly, his first sound beyond the blocks yesterday. She felt her chest fill with joy. Each small sound mattered in Oliver's world. After breakfast, Maria followed the routine. She gently guided Oliver to the tutor's room where Ms. Patel waited with books on a low table. Oliver sat on a cushion and watched while the tutor showed him flashcards with pictures. Maria stayed nearby, offering a tissue when he needed it and whispering encouragement. He pointed to the cards: a dog, a ball, a house, but he did not name them. Yet he did point, and he watched their lips when they spoke. During the lesson, Maria noted in her notebook that Oliver tracked speech with his eyes. He seemed interested in sounds. She wondered if she could use that to help him speak. But for now, she simply observed. At 11, they moved to the art corner. Maria set out crayons and paper. Oliver chose red and blue, and he began to draw simple shapes and lines. He pressed the crayon hard and soft, and each color left its mark. Maria sat beside him and whispered stories about his drawings. "That red line looks like a strong bridge," she said. Oliver looked at her and drew another line. He seemed proud of his bridge. After art, lunch arrived, sandwiches cut into triangles, fresh vegetables, and little squares of cake for dessert. Oliver ate carefully, and at one point, he looked at Maria and pointed to his mouth. Maria smiled. "You want more turkey?" she asked. He nodded, and she gave him another piece of sandwich. She noted that he used gestures to speak his needs. It reminded her that speech could grow from simple gestures. The afternoon was quieter. The family took Oliver to the garden to play on a small swing. Maria pushed him gently. He laughed when the wind blew his hair back. Thomas and Isabel were nearby, holding hands and watching. Maria saw relief on the mother's face. The joy in Oliver's laughter was the moment they had waited for. When evening neared, Maria brought Oliver back inside. She drew a warm bath for him and gently washed his hair. He hummed softly, his own tune while she worked. Maria hummed back in the same key, hoping he might match her. But he was quiet again, content but silent. Finally, bedtime came. Maria tucked him into bed and sat at his side with a small storybook. She read about a girl who found her lost puppy. She used simple words and soft tones. Oliver's eyes grew heavy. Maria closed the book and whispered goodnight, waited, half expecting him to drift into sleep. But instead, Oliver reached for her hand. He squeezed it gently. Maria felt a warm joy fill her chest. It was the best, wordless goodnight she had ever heard. She leaned forward to press her cheek to his and whispered, "Sweet dreams, my brave friend." As Maria left the room, she closed the door quietly. She stood in the hallway, breathing deeply, and smiled to herself. It had been only one day, but she had seen courage in Oliver's eyes. She believed that with patience, love, and quiet care, his voice would one day fill this grand house. And in that belief, Maria found her own strength renewed for the days ahead. Maria arrived early the next morning as the sun rose soft and pale over the garden. She carried her small notebook in one hand and a gentle smile on her face. Oliver was already awake when she slipped into the playroom. He sat on the rug, legs crossed, a wooden train set spread before him. He did not look up, but his small fingers tapped a bright blue engine as if he remembered yesterday's game with the blocks. Maria set her bag beside her quietly and sat down, keeping one arm wrapped loosely around her notebook. She did not speak at first. Instead, she picked up a red train car and nudged it toward Oliver. He glanced at it, then tapped his train car back to her. Maria smiled, her heart warming at this small greeting. She tapped again, and soon they were sending train cars along invisible tracks between them. It felt like two friends sharing a secret. When the train game ended, Maria took out a small stack of picture cards. She had made them herself, simple photos of animals, fruits, and toys. She placed one card at a time in front of Oliver, speaking the word softly. Apple. Dog ball. He watched the lip movements carefully, his eyes bright with curious attention, but he did not speak. Instead, he reached out his small hand and pointed to each picture he wanted to name. Maria wrote in her notebook, Oliver, points to pictures. Clearly interested in words, but not yet speaking. She closed the notebook and said to him, That is okay. You show me. Good job. She clapped softly, and he winked at her, a small sign of trust. After breakfast, they followed the usual routine with Miss Patel. Today, the tutor wanted to try a new game. She brought a small chalkboard and colored chalk. She asked Oliver to draw the letter shapes for the words they had practiced yesterday. Oliver hesitated, but Maria knelt beside him. She gently took his hand and guided him to trace a circle for O and a straight line for I. He was surprised, and his small brow furrowed, looked up at Maria for guidance, and she nodded, smiling. He traced the shapes again, this time more confidently. When the lesson ended, Maria patted his shoulder. She could see that Oliver felt proud. She made a note. First time tracing letters. Positive reaction to gentle guidance. New words could follow shapes, and shapes could follow patience. Later, during art time, Maria tried something new. Instead of only crayons and paper, she placed small stickers of animals on the table. There was a row of cats, dogs, and birds. She told Oliver, let's make a story with stickers. Picked a cat sticker and placed it on white paper. Maria added a dog. Then she whispered the cat saw the dog and said, Meow, what sound does a dog make? She waited. He looked at her lips as she formed the word woof, but he did not mimic it. Then something surprising happened. Oliver tapped his chest and then pointed at the sticker dog. He tapped again at his chest as if trying to say, woof. Maria's heart leapt. He whispered, Good try, Oliver. Woof. She clapped softly. Oliver's smile grew bright the first time she heard him giggle during play. It felt as if the sound was waiting inside him. That afternoon, Maria decided to share her discovery with Thomas and Isabel. She found them in the sitting room, their faces drawn with worry. Isabel was reading a book, and Thomas scrolled through his phone. Maria cleared her throat. Mr. and Mrs. Carlyle, may I share something? They looked up, surprised but willing. I saw Oliver tap his chest and point at the dog sticker after we talked about woof. It seemed like he wanted to try to say it. Thomas set his phone aside, and Isabel closed her book, exchanged hopeful glances. That is wonderful, said Isabel, voice trembling. But it was only a gesture. He didn't say the word yet. Maria shook her head gently. It is still progress. He connected the sound with the picture. She showed them her notebook, where she had written down each small step. Thomas traced the page with his finger. Thank you, Maria, he said softly. Your notes help us see his progress. Isabel reached across the table and squeezed Maria's hand. Maria felt tears prick at her own eyes, but she blinked them back. She reminded herself that she was here to help, not to worry. In the days that followed, Maria created a gentle game to build on the sticker activity. She found a small recorder, the kind that plays back sounds. She taught Oliver how to press the red button, speak into the microphone, and then hear himself. At first, he only pressed and paused, fascinated by the blinking light. Then Maria whispered, Say, Mama. He looked at her, hesitant. She pressed his small finger to the button, and they both waited. Oliver opened his mouth, and a soft, quiet sound came out. Ma. The recorder played it back. Ouch. Maria held her breath. Then he pressed it again. Ma. This time it sounded stronger. Maria clapped her hands softly and whispered in his ear, You did it, Oliver. He grinned and pressed the button himself. Ma. The recorder echoed. His face lit up as if he had found a new toy, one made of his own voice. Maria gently guided him to press the tape into her palm. She added a label, Mama, and stuck it next to the speaker. Oliver watched, fascinated by the word attached to the sound. That evening, when Maria led Oliver back to his room, she gently tucked him in and whispered, "Try the recorder again tomorrow, okay?" He nodded, his eyelids heavy. As she closed the door behind her, she felt the weight of hope settle in her heart. The next morning, Maria brought the recorder to breakfast. Oliver looked at it, then at her. She held it out. He picked it up, studied the red button, and pressed it. He said softly, "Mama." The machine repeated, "Mama." Oliver's eyes shone, pressed it again, louder. "Mama." Maria laughed quietly. "Yes, Oliver, Mommy." She made the connection clear. He looked at Thomas and Isabel's empty chair. She pointed to the word Mommy on a new label. He pressed the recorder again. "Mommy." The machine echoed. He giggled at the sound of his own voice. Isabel walked into the dining room just in time to hear the soft, recorded Mommy. She dropped her teacup in surprise, and tears sprang to her eyes. Thomas knelt beside Oliver, wrapping his arms around him. "Sweet boy," he said, voice thick. Oliver beamed, clutching the recorder like a precious stone. Maria watched, tears in her own eyes, but she stood quietly in the corner, letting the family have their moment. Over the next week, Maria continued the recorder game. She swapped in new words, daddy, apple, dog. Oliver learned to press and speak each one. More importantly, he began to try on his own, reaching for the device without encouragement. Maria documented each effort, each hesitation, and each new success. She noticed that Oliver's eyes followed her mouth more closely now, as if he studied the shape of each word. One afternoon, Ms. Patel invited Maria to sit in on a session. She wanted to try a word-building activity using letter blocks. Oliver lined up blocks that spelled MOMY. He looked at the blocks, then at the recorder. Finally, he pointed at the first block, then at his mouth. Maria felt her chest tighten. "It was time," she whispered. "Say Mommy." He pressed his lips together, took a breath, and said in a clear voice, "Mommy." The tutor gasped, and Maria clapped softly, as Oliver's cheeks flushed with pride. That night, the family gathered in the garden under twinkling lights. Isabel held Oliver as they sipped cocoa. Thomas walked over to Maria with a small box. "We want you to have this," he said. Maria opened it to find a silver pendant engraved with Oliver's new first word, Mommy. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Isabel, whose tears sparkled in the lantern light. "Thank you," Maria whispered. "Was all him." Isabel shook her head. "It was you too. Your kindness made him find his voice again." Maria stood in the warm glow of the garden lights, looking at the box in her hands. She realized that trust had grown between her and Oliver like a seed. Every small step, every gentle game, every soft word had nurtured him. And in return, he had given her the greatest gift, his trust and his voice. She knew the journey was far from over, but tonight she celebrated each small victory. And for the first time since she arrived, she felt that anything was possible. Maria woke before dawn, her heart light with hope. She dressed quietly and slipped into the playroom, where the morning light filtered through the curtains. Oliver sat on the rug, his small legs folded neatly beneath him, tracing shapes in the soft carpet with one finger. When he saw Maria, he offered her a shy smile. Maria returned it, then set her bag down and pulled out a new game she had prepared the night before, a simple treasure hunt with picture clues. She laid out 3 cards on the floor. Each card had a photo: a red apple, a yellow duck, and a green leaf. She knelt beside Oliver and whispered, "We will look for treasure." The first clue's picture is an apple. She pointed to the apple. "Card." Oliver looked at the card, then at the small fruit bowl on the table. He toddled over, picked up a real apple, and returned with it. Maria clapped softly. "Very good," she said. She held up the second card, the yellow duck, and pointed toward the bathtub where his rubber duck floated. Oliver nodded, trotted to the bathroom, and brought back his yellow duck. Maria's eyes brimmed with pride. The last card showed a pale green leaf. Maria led him into the garden. The air smelled of grass and earth. She pointed to a small maple tree. Oliver crouched, plucked a fallen leaf, and handed it to her. Maria hugged him gently. "You found all the treasures?" she said. She reached behind her back and produced a small box decorated with bright ribbons. Inside lay 3 toy blocks, each engraved with a simple word: apple, duck, leaf. She passed the blocks to him one by one. "Now we say the words," she encouraged. He held the apple block, traced the letters with his fingertip, and gazed at Maria. She whispered, "Apple." He pressed the block to his lips and tried to say apple, but no sound came. He looked down, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. Maria knelt beside him and whispered, "It's okay. We will try again later." He offered a small nod, clutching the block to his chest. At breakfast, Oliver sat at the small table with his fruit and toast. Maria placed the 3 toy blocks before him. She said each word slowly as she tapped the matching block. "Apple, duck, leaf." Oliver watched her lips carefully, eyes intent. He then pointed at the duck block. Maria repeated duck. He opened his mouth, and a soft, breathy dew escaped Maria's chest, filled with joy. She whispered, "Yes, Oliver, duck." She wrote in her notebook, "First voiced attempt. Do." Oliver watched her write, then grinned, as if proud of his work. Later, during therapy with Miss Patel, Maria asked permission to join the session. The tutor welcomed her. They arranged colorful letter beads on a string. Each bead stood for a sound, UPPL. Oliver held the string, curious about the shining beads. Miss Patel showed him how to move each bead while saying its sound. A. P. P. L. E. Then she held his hand to guide it. He repeated softly, "A. P." He stopped. Maria knelt beside him, gently took his other hand, and they moved the beads together, finishing the word. Together they said, "Apple." Oliver's eyes lit up. He mimicked their mouths, moving his lips slowly. Then he let go of the beads and said in a clear, soft voice, "Apple." Patel gasped, and Maria clapped softly, tears prickling at her eyes. Thomas and Isabel appeared at the door, drawn by the sound. They rushed in, and when they heard apple, they embraced Oliver, their joy shining bright. That afternoon, Maria introduced music therapy. She placed a small keyboard on a low table and showed Oliver a gentle melody. She played the notes, slowly, CDE. Then she sang a song about his name, Oliver, Oliver, Oliver. She encouraged him to sing along. He watched her hands dance over the keys, then hesitated. He reached for the microphone by the keyboard and Maria pressed play. When he spoke into the mic, his voice crackled with static. Pa, pa. He laughed at the funny sound. Maria whispered, "Papa." He tried again, "Papa." The machine echoed back. He beamed. She wrote, "Spontaneous Papa." Oliver repeated it once more, laughing at the echo, thrilled to hear his own voice. As the sun dipped low, Maria walked with Oliver in the garden. The air turned cool, and fireflies blinked among the flowers. She told him a story of a little frog who lost his way and called for his mother. She imitated the frog's soft cry, "Ma, ma." Suddenly, Oliver stopped at her side and whispered, "Ma, ma." He closed his eyes as he said it. Maria's breath caught. She dropped to one knee and held his hand. He said, "Mama, Oliver." He opened his eyes, surprised. He pressed his small fingers to his lips and then pointed at her. "Mama?" he asked again, even softer. Maria felt tears slide down her cheeks. She pressed her cheek to his and whispered, "Yes, Mama." He giggled softly and hugged her around the neck. That evening, the family gathered for dinner in the dining room. A roast chicken sat on the table, surrounded by vegetables. Oliver climbed into his high chair and watched as Maria placed a small plate in front of him. She said, "Enjoy your meal, Oliver." He shrugged, then reached for a drumstick and took a bite. Thomas poured a glass of juice for him. Maria watched his small hands, his bright eyes. After a few bites, Oliver set his fork down and pointed to Isabel. Maria said, "You want Mommy?" He looked at her, nodded, and whispered, "Mommy." The word was soft, but clear. Isabel gasped and covered her mouth, breathless. Thomas rose and joined Isabel, and they both turned to Maria. Maria just smiled, tears shining in her eyes. After dinner, as the family moved to the living room, Maria guided Oliver to the sofa. Isabel sat on one side, Thomas on the other, and Maria beside Oliver. Isabel took his hand. "Can you say I love you, Mommy?" she asked. Oliver paused, looked around, then said slowly, "I love you, Mommy." His voice was gentle and filled with wonder. Isabel hugged him, and Thomas encircled them both in his arms. Maria watched from the edge of the sofa, her heart warm and full. Later, when Oliver was asleep and the house was quiet, Maria sat at her desk in her room. She opened her notebook and reviewed her notes. She saw the tiny steps that had led to this moment. The treasure hunt, the recorder, the letter beads, the keyboard, the bedtime story. Each step had nurtured Oliver's courage. She wrote at the top of a new page, Part 3, A Hint of Change. Then she paused, realizing that he had moved beyond hints. He was speaking more every day. She closed the notebook and whispered, "Well done, my brave boy." Before drifting to sleep, Maria thought of the days ahead. She imagined Oliver exploring more words, sharing stories, singing songs. She dreamed of his laughter echoing through the halls. She fell asleep smiling, comforted by the knowledge that love, patience, and gentle care could awaken the strongest voice of all. ChatGPT said, "The morning of Isabel's birthday dawned bright and clear." Maria tiptoed through the quiet halls, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked early from the garden. She paused outside Oliver's room and listened. Soft snores drifted through the door. She smiled and set the flowers on her bedside table for later. Today would be special for Isabel, of course, but also for Oliver. Maria felt a happy flutter in her chest, remembering how much he had grown in these past weeks. In the dining room, Maria arranged treats on a low table, small sandwiches cut into triangles, strawberries dipped in yogurt, and tiny cupcakes with pastel frosting. She placed a stack of colorful plates and napkins nearby. Outside, the garden was already decorated. Isabel had chosen ribbons in pink and gold, and Thomas had tied them on the hedges and around the little oak tree. Paper lanterns swung gently in the breeze. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers near the rose bushes. Maria went back inside to check on Oliver. She found him sitting at his small table, focused on a puzzle. He looked up when she entered, eyes bright, patted the seat beside him. Maria sat down and handed him a piece with a curious turtle shape. He smiled and fitted into place. "Great work," she whispered. He beamed, his confidence shining. By 10 o'clock, a few guests had arrived, close family friends and neighbors. They greeted Isabel with warm embraces and wished her a happy birthday. Maria stood quietly to one side, watching. Isabel glowed in a flowing pink dress, her dark hair pinned back with a small flower. Thomas whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. Maria saw Isabel's eyes drift to Oliver. He waved at her shyly, then turned back to his puzzle. As more guests arrived, Isabel excused herself and went to check on Oliver. Maria followed her. Isabel crouched beside her son. "Are you ready for the party, baby?" she asked softly. Oliver nodded and held up his puzzle piece. Isabel kissed his cheek. Maria felt the warmth in Isabel's eyes when she looked at Oliver. She wondered if Isabel imagined her own voice finally filling their home. The guests moved outside. Maria led Oliver by the hand through the French doors. He paused on the threshold, taking in the bright garden flowers, ribbons, lanterns, and smiling faces. Maria squeezed his hand gently. He took a shaky breath and followed her toward the center of the celebration. The party had a gentle, joyful rhythm. People sipped tea from delicate cups and nibbled on pastries. Children chased bubbles that floated through the air. Maria watched as Oliver reached for the bubbles and popped them with quick taps. Each pop made him giggle, and his laugh sounded richer than it had earlier. Maria felt proud to see him join the fun. At noon, Thomas gathered everyone under the oak tree. He held a small microphone and spoke in a cheerful voice. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Isabel's birthday," he said. He looked at his wife and smiled. Isabel blushed and waved. Then Thomas looked out at the crowd, his eyes finding Maria's. He nodded slightly. Maria's stomach fluttered. She knew what was about to happen. Thomas tapped the microphone again. "There is one more surprise." Brought out a small music box that played a gentle melody. He wound it and set it on a table beside the oak tree. Then he turned to Oliver and said, "Oliver, can you wind the music box for Mommy?" Maria saw Oliver's chest rise and fall. He was nervous. He took the key in his small hand and turned it. The music began to play. Isabel's eyes widened. She watched Oliver, pride lighting her face. Maria knelt beside him and whispered, "You can say it, Oliver." He looked at her, mouth moving as he formed the word inside his mind. Maria held her breath. The melody drifted on, and the guests watched in gentle anticipation. Then, in a clear, soft voice, Oliver called out, "Mommy!" The word rang through the garden as the music wound to a gentle finish. Time seemed to pause. "The guests gasped in delight. Isabel's hand flew to her mouth. Thomas's eyes glistened. Maria felt tears sting her own eyes. For a moment, no one moved. Then Isabel ran forward and wrapped Oliver in her arms, lifting him off the ground. She whispered, "My sweet boy," over and over, her voice thick with joy, taking Oliver's feet and helping hug him from below. The crowd cheered softly, clapping in celebration. Maria stayed back, letting the family have their moment. She watched Isabel press her cheek to Oliver's and say, "I've waited so long. To hear you call me that?" Oliver's small arm squeezed his mother around the neck. Then he looked around as if amazed by the faces watching him. He tucked his head against Isabel's shoulder and whispered, "Happy birthday, Mommy." Isabel laughed through tears and set Oliver down. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "He said 2 words, she announced, holding it up so guests could read her quick note. The guests laughed and applauded again. Afterward, the party shifted to happy chatter. Guests approached Oliver, praising his courage. One of the neighbor children handed him a small toy car. Maria watched him accept it with a shy grin. She sat nearby on a low bench and took out her notebook. Writing quickly, Part 4. Moment of wonder, Oliver's first clear vocal mommy during celebration. Later, as people began to leave, Isabel came over and knelt beside Maria. She took Maria's hand and held it. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know Oliver's progress is because of you." Maria shook her head. "He did this himself," she replied. "I only helped him find his voice." Isabel smiled and squeezed her hand. When the last guest had gone, Thomas brought out a small cake with pink frosting and white candles. Set it on a low table, and everyone sang happy birthday. Oliver watched the candles flicker. Thomas asked him, "What do you say?" Oliver closed his eyes, leaned forward, and blew out the candles. Then, in a small but clear voice, he called out, "Happy birthday, Mommy." The garden filled with laughter and applause once more. That evening, the family gathered in the living room. Maria sat on the sofa beside Isabel, who held Oliver in her lap. Warm fire glowed in the fireplace. Isabel stroked Oliver's hair and whispered, "Tell Mommy what you learned today." Oliver looked up, his brown eyes shining. He said, "I can say words," and then he leaned over and whispered, "I love you, Mommy." Isabel kissed him gently, and Thomas wrapped his arms around both of them. Maria watched the scene. She felt a deep sense of peace and joy. She had come here to help a silent boy find his voice, but in doing so, she had found a place of belonging and warmth. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the laughter and the soft crackle of the fire. Before turning in for the night, Maria paused at Oliver's door. She peeked inside. He lay asleep, the blankets pulled up to his chin, a small smile on his lips. She stepped inside quietly and placed the music box on his bedside table. The melody played softly as she wound the key and let it run for one brief moment. She watched Oliver stir, his lips forming a soft hum before he drifted back to sleep. Maria tiptoed out and closed the door. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and let out a contented sigh. She took out her notebook and wrote 2 words at the top of a fresh page: birthday miracle. Then she sealed the page and slipped the notebook into her bag. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new words for Oliver to explore. But tonight she would rest her heart full of gratitude. The grand house was quiet now, but Maria could still hear echoes of the day's joy. The crackle of candles, the soft music, and most of all, the clear voice of a little boy calling out "Mommy" with wonder and love. And in that echo, Maria found her own sense of purpose, renewed, for every silent child needed someone to believe in them, to listen, and to help their voice shine. Tonight that voice had shone brightest of all. Maria felt a quiet excitement as she entered the playroom the next morning. The early light glowed softly through the curtains, and the walls seemed to hold hints of the laughter from yesterday's celebration. She carried a tray with oatmeal, fresh fruit, and a small cup of warm milk, Oliver's favorite breakfast. He sat cross-legged on the rug, lightly tracing the edges of his wooden train tracks with one finger. When he saw Maria, his face lit up in a gentle smile. "Good morning, Oliver," she said, setting the tray on the small table. He reached for the oatmeal and took a careful spoonful. Maria sat beside him, pulling out her notebook to jot down notes today. She planned to introduce a new routine. But first, she let him eat in peace. He nibbled the fruit, humming softly, as if pleased by the sweet taste. The hum was more confident now, richer than the first tentative sound she'd heard. After breakfast, Maria led Oliver to the garden. The air was cool, and dew still clung to the blades of grass. She had set up a small table under the oak tree where they had celebrated Isabel's birthday. On the table were 3 items wrapped in bright paper: a picture book, a set of colorful felt letters, and a small chalkboard with chalk. She knelt beside him and said, "Today, we will do 3 special things. Are you ready?" Oliver nodded eagerly and bounced on his heels. The first gift was the picture book. Maria opened it to the first page, where a big, friendly elephant stood by a pond. She pointed and said, "Elephant." Then she pointed to the letter E on the felt sheet and held it up. She traced the shape of the E with her finger. "E-la font." Oliver watched her lips as they moved. Then he reached for the elephant picture, pointed, and whispered a clear elephant. Maria's heart raced. She clapped softly, careful not to startle him, and said, "Yes." "Fantastic job," he beamed at her, eyes shining. Next she handed him the felt letters. He spelled out simple words like cat, dog, and sun. Maria said each word slowly and placed the matching letters in front of him. "Cat," she said, pointing at the felt letters and then at the picture of a cat in the book. Oliver repeated after her, "Cat, then dog, then sun." With each new word, his confidence grew. Maria recorded each one in her notebook, said elephant, cat, dog. Sun, she felt a deep joy. These small steps showed how far he had come. The third gift was the chalkboard. Maria drew a simple scene: a house, a tree, and a smiling sun. She handed Oliver a piece of chalk and encouraged him to add something of his own. He drew a small stick figure beside the house. "Who is that?" Maria asked. He pointed at the figure and said proudly, "Me." Maria smiled and said, "Yes, you. Very good." Then she pointed to the tree and asked, "What is this?" He said, "Tree." Finally, she pointed to the sun and he said, "Sun." His voice was clear and strong. He even added another word, home, pointing to the house and sounding out the letters in his own way. After their outdoor lesson, Maria guided Oliver back inside for lunch. She noticed how he paused at the doorway as if wishing to say more. About the morning, she knelt and asked, "What was your favorite part today?" Oliver thought for a moment, then said, "Elephant and tree." Maria nodded. "And what did you say?" Wilden repeated, "Elephant, tree." She patted his shoulder. "Excellent," Maria wrote in her notebook. Independent word choices: elephant, tree. That afternoon, Isabel and Thomas joined them for a family activity. Maria had prepared an album where Oliver's words, drawings, and pictures could be collected. She showed them a blank page and asked Oliver where it should go. Pointed, and Maria placed a photo of him with the recorder game under yesterday's birthday miracle entry. Then she wrote Part 5, a new chapter above. She handed him colored markers and encouraged him to decorate the page. He drew several stickers and wrote one word: happy. Isabel clapped softly at the cheerful decoration. Thomas put one arm around Isabel and said, "This is beautiful, thanks to you both." Later, when Ms. Patel arrived for the final session of the week, she brought a music box and a puppet. She suggested they try a puppet theater game to encourage conversational speech. Maria arranged the small stage on a low table, and the Puppetan owl peeked out from behind a curtain. Maria held another puppet, a mouse. She began a playful dialogue. "Owl, who are you?" "Ow. I am Mouse. I am Mouse." Oliver watched. Eyes wide, Maria handed him the mouse puppet. He looked at it, then said in a clear voice, "I am Oliver." The room filled with applause from everyone. Even the owl puppet seemed to cheer. Maria felt tears threaten again, but she blinked them back, overwhelmed by pride in his progress. As the sun began to set, the family gathered in the living room. Soft light from the lamps created a warm glow. Isabel held Oliver on her lap. Thomas sat beside them, and Maria sat across in a cozy chair. They each took turns telling stories about the week. Isabel remembered the first time Oliver giggled at the recorder echo. Thomas recalled the chalkboard drawing that had surprised him. Maria shared how Oliver had chosen the word happy for the album. Each memory was like a shining gem, reflecting the journey of trust, patience, and love. Isabel looked at Maria and said, "We have seen a miracle in our home." "You have given Oliver the courage to speak?" Maria shook her head. "He gave himself that courage," she replied softly. "I only found ways to help him." Isabel reached over and squeezed her hand. "We are forever grateful." Before bedtime, Maria tucked Oliver into his bed. She asked him to name 3 things he loved, thought, then said clearly, "Family, books, flowers." Maria smiled. She whispered, "Wonderful. Good night, Oliver." He closed his eyes, but then whispered, "Good night, Maria." Maria's heart soared. She knelt and kissed his forehead. "Sleep well, brave boy." As Maria prepared for sleep, in her own room, she reflected on each part of the journey. Part 1 had been the arrival, meeting a silent child and feeling a spark of hope. Part 2 was small steps, games, gestures, early attempts. Part 3 brought hints of change, first words, like apple and duck. Part 4 was the moment of wonder, Oliver's clear mommy at the garden party. Part 5 was this new chapter, confidence, clear sentences, and joyful sharing. She opened her notebook and flipped through the pages. Each page held notes, drawings, photos, and memories. The final page, labeled a new chapter, was still blank. Maria smiled as she picked up a pen and wrote 3 words in bold: believe, encourage, grow. She knew those words would guide the days ahead. Then she placed a small flower, one of the wildflowers she had picked for Isabel, between the pages as a keepsake. Before turning off the light, Maria looked out her window at the silent house. It no longer felt grand and distant. It felt warm and alive, filled with voices that were once silent. She thought of Oliver's first clear sentences and the sound of his laughter echoing down the hall. She felt grateful for the trust he had placed in her and for the gift he had given the family and herself. Maria closed her eyes, her heart full. She dreamed of the coming days, new words to learn, new stories to share, new games to play. She knew challenges would come, but she also knew that love and patience could guide them through anything. And as she drifted to sleep, she whispered, a quiet promise into the night. "I will always believe in you, Oliver."